The ink on the divorce papers was still wet when the heart monitor began to scream. Isola didn't cry because she was losing her husband. She cried because she was losing her life, and the man she had loved for 10 years was checking his Cartier watch, annoyed that her dying was taking too long. "Hurry up," he sneered, stepping over her hospital gown to leave with his mistress. He thought he was walking toward freedom. He didn't know he was walking away from the only woman who could save him and straight into the path of the one man powerful enough to destroy him. This is the story of how Derek Sterling threw away a diamond to pick up a stone, and how a billionaire rival turned a tragedy into the ultimate revenge. The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of the VIP suite on the 12th floor of Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and impending death. Isola Sterling lay pale against the stark white sheets. Her breathing was shallow, a rattling sound that seemed to shake her fragile frame. At 7 months pregnant, she was suffering from severe preeclampsia, complicated by a failing heart. Her body was giving up. But the man standing at the foot of her bed didn't look concerned. He looked bored. Derek Sterling, CEO of Sterling Dynamics, adjusted the cuff of his bespoke Armani suit. He checked his reflection in the darkened window, smoothing back his blonde hair. He was handsome, in that sharp, predatory way that made Wall Street tremble, but in this room, he just looked cold. "Isola, we don't have all night," Derek said, his voice devoid of any warmth. He tapped a manicured finger against the manila envelope resting on her legs. "Sign the papers. Now." Isola struggled to open her eyes. The room was spinning. "Derek," she whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her swollen stomach. "The babies. The doctor said my blood pressure is too high. Stress." "The doctor says a lot of things," Derek snapped. "Look, let's be real. You aren't going to make it. Why complicate my life with probate courts and inheritance taxes? If you sign the divorce papers now and waive your rights to the Sterling shares, I'll make sure you get a decent funeral. I'll even bury you next to your mother." A tear leaked from Isola's eye, tracking through the sweat on her temple. "You're leaving me now." "I left you a long time ago, Isola. I just didn't move out until today." The door creaked open, and the scent of expensive, overpowering perfume flooded the sterile room. Sasha Vane walked in. She was everything Isola currently wasn't, glowing healthy, and draped in a red Versace trench coat that screamed new money. She was Derek's VP of marketing, and apparently much more. "Is it done, darling?" Sasha asked, not even looking at the dying woman. She was busy typing on her iPhone 15 Pro Max. "The reservation at Le Bernardin is at 8. I don't want to be late." "She's being difficult," Derek sighed. He leaned over the bed, his face close to Isola's. "Listen to me. Sasha is pregnant with a son, a real heir, not these—" He gestured vaguely at Isola's stomach. "Whatever burdens you're carrying, the doctors say the twins are distressing your heart. You're dying because of them. Just let go, sign the papers, and let me start my life with a woman who can actually stand by my side at a gala without fainting." The cruelty was a physical blow. Isola looked at Sasha, who was smirked, touching her own flat stomach. "He loves me, Isola," Sasha said, her voice like calm poison. "He needs a wife who shines. You've always been so dim, so domestic." Isola's hand trembled as she reached for the Mont Blanc pen Derek held out. She wasn't signing it to give him what he wanted. She was signing it because she wanted to sever the tie before she died. She didn't want to die as Derek Sterling's wife. With the last ounce of her strength, she scrawled a shaky Isola Bennett. Derek snatched the paper away instantly. Finally. He checked the signature, satisfied. Goodbye, Isila. Don't worry about the hospital bill. I'm canceling your insurance as of midnight, but I'm sure the state will take care of the body. Derek! Isila gasped, a sharp pain shooting through her chest. The monitor beside her began to beep faster. Beep, 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 beep. Let's go, Sasha, Derek said, turning his back. Derek, help! Isila choked out. Her vision went white. Derek paused at the door. He looked back not with regret, but with disgust. I'm not a doctor, Isila. Good luck. The door clicked shut. Moments later, the high-pitched, continuous tone of the heart monitor filled the room. Isila Bennett fell into the darkness alone. The chaos started 10 seconds after Derek left. Code Blue Room 1204, Code Blue. Nurses and doctors swarmed the room. Dr. Evans, the chief obstetrician, was shouting orders. Get the crash cart! She's going into cardiac arrest. We need to deliver these babies via emergency C-section right now, or we lose all 3 of them. Doctor, we can't, a nurse yelled, holding a clipboard. The insurance file just updated in the system. It's been terminated. The primary account holder blocked authorization for emergency surgery. It requires a $250,000 deposit for the high-risk NICU team immediately. Damn it, Dr. Evans growled, charging the paddles. Call the husband. Tell him if he doesn't authorize this, he's getting charged with manslaughter. We tried, doctor. It's going straight to voicemail. Isila was floating. She could hear them, but they sounded like they were underwater. She saw the light fading. My babies, she thought. I failed them. The door to the suite burst open again, but it wasn't Derek returning. A man strode in, flanked by 2 massive bodyguards. He was wearing a charcoal bespoke suit that cost more than most people's cars. He had dark, intense eyes and a jawline that looked carved from granite. He didn't look like a visitor. He looked like a storm. Who are you? Get out, Dr. Evans shouted, placing the paddles on Isila's chest. Clear Isila's body convulsed. The line stayed flat. The man stepped forward, his presence sucking the air out of the room. I am Julian Blackwood, and you will save her. The room froze. Julian Blackwood, the owner of Blackwood Global, the tech billionaire who had been at war with Derek Sterling for 5 years. Mr. Blackwood, we have no authorization, the nurse stammered. Julian pulled a black titanium American Express Centurion card from his pocket and slammed it onto the metal tray next to the crash cart. The sound rang out like a gunshot. Swipe it, Julian commanded, his voice low and terrifying. Authorize everything. Get the best cardiac surgeon from Columbia Presbyterian on a chopper. Get the NICU team prepped. If she dies because you were waiting for paperwork, I will buy this hospital and turn it into a parking lot by tomorrow morning. Dr. Evans nodded, adrenaline spiking. Charge to 200 clear. Thump. Nothing. Julian moved to the side of the bed. He took Isila's limp, cold hand in his warm one. He leaned down, whispering into her ear, ignoring the chaos around them. Isila, do not dare give him the satisfaction, Julian growled, his voice cracking slightly. You were the smartest girl in our economics class at Yale. You don't quit. You fight. Fight for the children. Fight for me. Clear Dr. Evans hit her again. On the monitor, a single jagged spike appeared. Then another. Beep, beep. We have a pulse, Dr. Evans shouted. Weak, but it's there. Get her to the OR. Now move, move, move. As they wheeled Isila's gurney out, Julian didn't let go of her hand until they reached the sterile line of the operating theater. He stood there, his suit splashed with the water from her rain-soaked hair, watching the doors swing shut. He pulled out his phone. It was a secure line. "Prepare the Gulfstream G650, Julian said. "I need a medical transport team ready to fly to Zurich in 48 hours. And get me my lawyers." "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. What about Derek Sterling?" his assistant asked on the other end. Julian's eyes darkened. "Let him think she's dead. Let him enjoy his victory. Because when I bring her back, I want him to feel the ground crumble beneath his feet." 2 years later. The sun reflected off the pristine snow of the Swiss Alps. On the balcony of a secluded, ultra-luxurious chalet overlooking Lake Zurich, a woman stood doing yoga. She looked nothing like the frail creature in the hospital bed. Her body was toned, strong, and vibrant. Her hair, once dull and brittle, fell in cascading chestnut waves down her back. Isila took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. "Mama, Mama." 2 toddlers, a boy and a girl, came stumbling onto the deck, bundled in thick wool coats. Leo and Mia. They were the picture of health with bright eyes and rosy cheeks. "Careful, you two," a deep voice rumbled. Julian stepped out onto the deck, holding 2 mugs of steaming hot chocolate. He looked different too, less angry, more at peace. Over the last 2 years, he had been their guardian, their protector, and Isila's mentor. "They have your energy, Julian." Isila laughed, picking up Mia. "And your stubbornness." Julian smiled, handing Isila her coffee. "Are you ready? The helicopter arrives in an hour." Isila's expression sobered. She walked to the railing, looking toward the west, toward New York. "Is it time?" she asked. "Sterling Dynamics is announcing their quarterly earnings tomorrow," Julian said. "Derek's revolutionary AI project is failing. The stock is wobbling. Sasha has been spending money faster than he can make it. They are vulnerable." Isila took a sip of coffee. "And the shares?" "My legal team has confirmed it," Julian said. "When your grandmother passed away 10 years ago, she left 15% of the original Sterling Company stock to you in a trust. Derek thought he absorbed it when you married, but he never filed the final transfer paperwork because he was too arrogant to read the fine print. You are still the legal owner." 15%, Isila mused. "Plus the 36% you've quietly acquired through shell companies." "That gives us 51%, Julian said. "Majority control." Isila turned to look at him. For 2 years, she had healed. She had undergone surgeries to repair her heart. She had spent nights crying over the betrayal and mornings training with the best business minds Julian could hire. She wasn't just Isila anymore. She was a weapon Julian had sharpened, but the fire inside was all hers. "He left me to die, Julian. He left his children to die." "I know." Julian stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. The tension between them had been building for months, a slow burn of respect, and something deeper. "So, what do you want to do?" Isila's eyes hardened. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a queen returning to claim her throne. "I want to go home," she said, "and I want to introduce him to his children." Julian grinned a predatory smile that promised chaos. "The Met Gala is next week. The theme is Gilded Glamour. Derek and Sasha are co-chairs. It's the biggest social event of the season." "Perfect," Isila said. "I need a dress. Something red." "Why red?" "Because," Isila said, looking at the scar on her chest where they had restarted her heart, "it's the color of revenge." The steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art were transformed into a river of crimson carpet, flanked by walls of paparazzi, whose camera flashes created a disorienting strobe effect against the New York night sky. The theme was Gilded Glamour, an ode to excess wealth and power. Derek Sterling hated every second of it. He stood at the top of the stairs, forcing a rictus grin as photographers screamed his name. Beside him, Sasha Vane preened. She wore a custom gold lame gown by a hot new designer that was too tight, too low cut, and screamed, "Trying too hard." 2 years had not been kind to their affair. The thrill of the forbidden was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of Sasha's incessant demands and her complete inability to grasp the subtleties of high society. "Smile bigger, darling," Sasha hissed through her teeth, digging her sharp nails into his bicep. "The New York Times photographer is looking right at us. And stand up straight. You look like you're facing a firing squad." "Maybe I'd rather be," Derek muttered, checking his phone for the 10th time in as many minutes. Sterling Dynamics stock had closed down another 4% today. The rumors of his failed Project Chimera AI were leaking, and his investors were getting spooked. The last thing he needed was to play dress-up with a woman he was rapidly growing to despise. Sasha had not produced the real heir she had promised in that hospital room. There had been a complication a few months after Isilla died, or so she claimed. Derek sometimes suspected there never was a pregnancy at all, just a leash to yank him away from his dying wife. "Look at them," Sasha sneered, nodding toward the arrival of the CEO of J.P. Morgan. "They all look at me like I'm the help. You need to buy another yacht, Derek. A bigger one. Show them we matter." "We are bleeding cash, Sasha. Stop spending it on Birkins in every color and maybe they'll take us seriously." Before Sasha could launch into a tantrum, a hush fell over the chaotic crowd at the bottom of the stairs. It was the kind of silence that only true, terrifying power commands. A convoy of 3 blacked-out Cadillac Escalades pulled up. Security guards built like linebackers swarmed out to create a protective corridor. The door of the middle vehicle opened. First emerged a polished black dress shoe, followed by Julian Blackwood. He wore a Tom Ford tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, his presence commanding immediate respect and fear. He hadn't been seen at a public event in 2 years. The press went feral. But the real shock came when he turned and offered his hand to the person inside. A woman stepped out. The silence deepened, then shattered into a frenzy of camera shutters that sounded like machine gun fire. She was wearing a blood-red Alexander McQueen gown, structured yet flowing with a train that seemed to pool like liquid rubies on the red carpet. The bodice was armored with subtle beadwork that caught the light like scales. Around her neck hung a diamond necklace so large it looked heavy. The legendary Crimson Heart Cartier had recently acquired, rumored to be worth $30 million. Her dark hair was swept up in an intricate, severe style that highlighted her long neck and high cheekbones. Her makeup was flawless, sharp, and predatory. "Who is that?" Sasha whispered, her jealousy instantly flaring. "Is she a model? An actress?" Derek couldn't speak. He felt a phantom pain in his chest, a cold sweat breaking out beneath his starched shirt. He knew those eyes. They were amber, like fine whiskey, and they were currently locked onto him with the intensity of a sniper scope. "It can't be," Derek breathed, his knees feeling weak. Julian placed a possessive hand on the small of the woman's back, and together they ascended the stairs, parting the sea of celebrities and socialites like royalty. They moved with a synchronized grace that spoke of deep familiarity. As they reached the top platform where Derek and Sasha were holding court as co-chairs, Julian stopped. "Derek," Julian said, his voice smooth granite. "A lovely evening. Surprisingly tacky decor, but I suppose that's your signature style." Derek ignored the jab. He was staring at the woman. Up close, the resemblance was terrifying, but the demeanor was alien. Isila had been soft, quiet, always shrinking to make room for his ego. This woman took up all the oxygen in the immediate vicinity. "Do I know you?" Derek managed to choke out his voice hoarse. The woman tilted her head slightly, a ghost of a smirk playing on her red lips. "It's rude to stare at a dead woman, Derek. People might think you've seen a ghost." Sasha gasped, clutching her chest melodramatically. "What? Who are you? You don't recognize the woman whose deathbed you walked away from to make a dinner reservation." Isila said, her voice ice cold, carrying just enough for the surrounding elite to hear. Heads turned. Whispers began to snake through the crowd like wildfire. "Isila," Derek whispered, horrified. "But the hospital, they said I code blued," Isila corrected. "Which I did. Twice. But unlike you, Julian didn't leave when things got difficult." She stepped closer, the scent of a rare, expensive oud perfume wafting over them, replacing Sasha's cheap floral scent. "I survived, Derek, and I spent the last 2 years watching you slowly destroy everything we built." "You're dead!" Sasha shrieked, drawing unwanted attention. "You're supposed to be dead. We have the death certificate. A clerical error easily fixed with enough money and the right lawyers," Julian interjected smoothly. "Something we'll be discussing in detail very soon." Derek looked from Julian to Isila. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Julian Blackwood, his mortal enemy, had his wife. You've been with him," Derek accused, his face turning purple. "For 2 years?" Isila laughed, a low, throaty sound devoid of humor. "Oh, Derek, always focusing on the wrong thing. Yes, I've been with him. He rebuilt me. He taught me. And now—" She stepped past him toward the entrance of the museum, pausing just long enough to look back over her shoulder. "Now he's unleashed me." Julian gave Derek a final, pitying look. "Enjoy the party, Sterling. It's likely your last one." They disappeared inside, leaving Derek standing on the steps, the flashes of the cameras now feeling like an interrogation under bright lights. He looked at Sasha, who was hyperventilating about a zombie ex-wife, and felt a profound surge of nausea. He knew with sickening certainty that the woman in red had not come for a reunion. She had come for an execution. The conference room on the top floor of the Sterling Dynamics Tower in Midtown Manhattan usually offered a commanding view of the city. Today, the blinds were drawn, the atmosphere heavy with the smell of stale coffee and fear. It was 8:00 a.m. Monday morning. Derek hadn't slept since the gala on Saturday night. He sat at the head of the 20-foot mahogany table, popping Xanax like candy. His board of directors sat around him, looking equally grim. The news of Isila's resurrection had hit the gossip columns on Sunday, and the markets opened in 90 minutes. The pre-market stock price was already in free fall. "How is this possible, Derek?" shouted Marcus Thorne, a silver-haired board member representing major institutional investors. "You told us the probate was clean. You said her shares reverted to the company treasury." "It was a mistake," Derek mumbled, rubbing his temples. "The hospital, the paperwork, a mistake that might cost us the company." Thorne slammed his hand on the table. "If she's alive and she never legally signed that divorce agreement under duress, she's still your wife, and she still owns her grandmother's legacy trust." "It's only 15%, Derek said desperately. "I still control 40%. We have the majority." The double doors to the conference room swung open with force banging against the walls. "Sorry we're late," Julian Blackwood said, strolling in as if he owned the building. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo today. He was in a power suit of navy blue pinstripes. Behind him walked Isila. She wore a tailored white Alexander McQueen pantsuit, that made her look like a sleek, modern avenging angel. She carried no purse, only a thin leather portfolio. "Security!" Derek jumped up, knocking over his water glass. "Get them out of here. This is a closed board meeting." "Actually," Isilla said, her voice calm and projecting clearly across the room, "it's a shareholders' meeting now." She walked to the other end of the table opposite Derek. Julian pulled out the chair for her, then took the one next to her. "You have no business here, Isilla," Derek snarled. "You've been declared legally dead for 2 years. You have no rights until a court says otherwise." Isilla slid the leather portfolio across the polished wood. It stopped perfectly in front of Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne," Isilla said, "inside you will find a notarized affidavit from Dr. Evans at Mount Sinai attesting to my survival and transport to Zurich. You will also find documentation proving that my signature on the divorce papers was obtained under extreme medical duress and while I was heavily medicated, rendering it void ab initio. And finally," she paused, letting the silence stretch, "you will find the updated shareholder registry." Thorne opened the folder, his eyes scanning the documents rapidly. His face went pale. He looked up at Derek, then back at Isilla, with new respect. "My grandmother left me 15% of Sterling Dynamics in an irrevocable trust," Isilla stated. "Derek was too lazy to ever finalize the absorption of those shares. They are mine." "Still only 15%, Derek gritted out. "I have 40%. "Had," Julian corrected gently. Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You see, Derek, when your stock started wobbling 6 months ago because your Project Chimera turned out to be vaporware, I started buying, quietly, through shell companies in Singapore, Dubai, the Caymans." Julian signaled to his assistant, who had slipped in behind them. The assistant projected a pie chart onto the main screen at the end of the room. The board members gasped. "Blackwood Global Entities now hold 36% of Sterling Dynamics stock," Julian announced. Isilla stood up. "Which means combined with my 15%, we control 51% of this company. We have the majority. We are taking over." Derek slumped back into his chair, defeated. The math was undeniable. He had been outflanked in his own boardroom. "This is a hostile takeover," one of Derek's loyalists muttered. "No," Isilla said coldly. "This is a correction." She didn't sit back down. She began to pace slowly around the table, trailing her hand along the backs of the chairs. "For 10 years I stood behind Derek while he built this company using my family's initial capital. I edited his speeches, I smoothed over his PR disasters, I managed the books in the early days, and when I became inconvenient, he discarded me." She stopped behind the chair of the chief financial officer, a man named Greg, who had helped Derek hide expenses related to Sasha. "Greg," Isilla said softly, "your services are no longer required. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal items. You have 10 minutes. "You can't do that," Greg spluttered. "I just did. Get out." Isilla's tone brooked no argument. Greg gathered his papers and fled. Isilla continued around the table. "Project Chimera is terminated immediately. We are launching a forensic audit into the R&D spending for the last 3 years. I suspect we'll find a lot of expensive dinners and private jet flights disguised as research." Derek watched in horror as Isilla systematically dismantled his power structure in under 20 minutes. She fired 3 more executives, restructured 2 departments, and ordered a complete freeze on all discretionary spending. She was brilliant, ruthless, and terrifyingly efficient. She was everything he had always wished she was, and she was using it to destroy him. Suddenly the door flew open again. Sasha Vane stumbled in, wearing sunglasses indoors and holding an enormous iced coffee. Derek, my credit card was declined at Bergdorf's. It was humiliating, fix it. She stopped, realizing the room was deathly silent and staring at her. She saw Isila at the head of the table and Julian beside her. "Oh God, is the zombie still here?" Sasha whined, taking a loud slurp from her straw. Isila looked at Sasha as if she were something disgusting stuck to the bottom of her shoe. "Ms. Vane," Isila said, "you are the VP of Marketing, correct?" "Yeah, so what?" Sasha retorted, trying to sound tough but failing. "I've reviewed your department's performance over the last 2 years. Marketing spend is up 200%, while brand engagement is down 45%. You've spent $4 million on influencer outreach that seems to consist mostly of parties for your friends." "Derek approved every cent," Sasha shouted, looking to Derek for help, but he just put his head in his hands. "Derek doesn't work here anymore," Isila said quietly. The room froze. Even Julian looked slightly surprised at the speed of her move. Isila turned to the board. "I am calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in Derek Sterling as CEO, citing gross negligence, fiduciary irresponsibility, and corporate malfeasance. Julian Blackwood is hereby nominated as interim CEO." The hands of the board members shot up faster than traders on a rally day. It was unanimous. "Derek," Isila said, looking down the long table at the man who had left her to die, "you're fired. Get out of my building." 3 weeks after being ousted from his own company, Derek Sterling sat in the dim light of a rented suite at the St. Regis. It wasn't his penthouse that had been seized by the bank the moment the stock plummeted, and his personal lines of credit were frozen by the forensic audit Isila had initiated. The room was littered with empty scotch bottles and takeout containers. Derek hadn't shaved in days. He stared at his phone, watching the news. Sterling Dynamics stock rebounds 15% under new interim CEO Julian Blackwood's leadership. Isila Bennett, the resurrected majority shareholder, announces a new philanthropic initiative. Derek hurled the remote at the TV, cracking the screen. "Stop throwing things, you idiot! We're going to get charged for that!" Sasha Vane stormed out of the bedroom. She wasn't wearing Versace anymore. She was wearing sweatpants, her hair a messy knot. The stress of the last month had stripped away her glamour, revealing a frantic, mean-spirited woman underneath. "Where are you going?" Derek slurred, eyeing the duffel bag she was packing. "I need space, Derek. You're toxic, you're broke, and you're depressing." Sasha spat, shoving a handful of jewelry into her bag, jewelry Derek had bought her with company funds. "You said you loved me." Derek laughed bitterly. "You said I was the love of your life. Was that only true when I had the black card?" "Love doesn't pay for my Pilates instructor, Derek," Sasha screamed. "And now the feds are sniffing around about the misappropriated funds. I'm not going to jail for you." Derek stood up, swaying slightly. "You spent that money too, Sasha. You're an accomplice." "Not if I turn witness," she muttered under her breath, zipping the bag. Before Derek could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "If you want to know who really killed your company, go to the loading dock of the warehouse on 4th Street. Midnight. Bring the police." Derek stared at the message. It was cryptic, but something in his gut told him to go. He grabbed his coat. Midnight. The warehouse district. The rain was pouring again, mirroring the night Isila had died. Derek parked his rented sedan in the shadows. He saw a figure in a hooded trench coat standing by the rear entrance of a dilapidated warehouse. A black sedan pulled up. The hooded figure handed over a hard drive to the driver of the sedan. The driver handed back a thick envelope of cash. Derek squinted. He knew that trench coat. It was the red Versace one Sasha had worn to the hospital. Rage, pure and molten, sobered him up instantly. He didn't wait for the police. He burst out of his car, sprinting toward them. "Sasha." The driver of the black sedan panicked, gunning the engine and peeling away, leaving Sasha standing there, clutching the cash. She spun around, her eyes wide with terror. "Derek, it's not what it looks like." Derek snatched the envelope from her hands. It was packed with $100 bills. He then ripped the hard drive from her other hand. "What is this?" Derek roared, shaking her. "What did you sell?" It's just the client list," Sasha sobbed, crumbling to the ground. "And the passwords to the offshore accounts I had to Derek. I have debts. The bookies in Atlantic City, they said they'd break my legs. You sold my company secrets to pay your gambling debts." Derek looked at her with absolute revulsion. "Is this why Project Chimera failed? Did you leak the prototypes to our competitors before we even launched?" Sasha didn't answer, but her silence was a confession. "And the baby?" Derek asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The son you promised me, the heir." Sasha wiped her nose, looking up at him with a mix of fear and spite. "There never was a baby, Derek. I knew you wouldn't leave Isla unless you thought I was giving you a son. I faked the ultrasound. I faked the miscarriage. You were just so eager to believe it because your ego is bigger than your brain." The truth hit Derek like a physical slap. He had killed his marriage, abandoned his dying wife, and ignored his unborn twins for a phantom child invented by a woman who was currently selling him out for cash. Sirens wailed in the distance. The text message hadn't just gone to Derek. It had gone to the authorities. "You set me up!" Sasha screamed, scrambling to pick up the loose bills blowing in the wind. Headlights flooded the alley. But it wasn't the police cars yet. It was a familiar black Escalade. The window rolled down. Julian Blackwood sat in the driver's seat with Isela beside him. Isela looked at the scene, Derek standing in the rain, broken, and Sasha crawling in the mud for money. "Pathetic," Isela said softly. "You knew," Derek shouted at the car, ignoring Sasha, who was now trying to run away. "Isela, you knew she was doing this. I've had a private investigator on Sasha for 2 years. Isela called out, her voice calm. "I knew about the gambling. I knew about the leaks. I just waited until she was desperate enough to do it in person so we could catch her on video." Julian pointed to the dashboard camera. "Smile, Derek. You're finally trending again." Police cruisers swarmed the alley. Officers tackled Sasha as she tried to scale a fence. Another officer approached Derek. "Derek Sterling, we have a warrant for your arrest regarding securities fraud and embezzlement." As they handcuffed him, Derek looked at the Escalade. Isela didn't look away. She watched him being shoved into the back of a squad car, her face an unreadable mask of justice. 6 months later. The holding cell at the New York County Family Court smelled of bleach and despair. Derek Sterling sat on the cold metal bench, picking at a loose thread on the cuff of his suit. It was an off-the-rack suit polyester and ill-fitting, bought for him by his court-appointed attorney. The bespoke Armani suits were gone, seized by the Asset Forfeiture Division, along with his penthouse, his cars, and his dignity. He had spent the last 6 months in a minimum security facility upstate while awaiting sentencing on the securities fraud charges. The plea deal was all but signed 5 years, maybe out in 3, for good behavior. But today wasn't about the money. Today wasn't about the fraud. Today was about the bloodline. "Mr. Sterling," Derek looked up. His lawyer, a harried, overworked public defender named Harold Finch, stood at the bars. Finch looked exhausted, his tie crooked. He clearly didn't want to be here. "Are you ready?" Finch asked, checking his watch. The judge is notoriously impatient before lunch. "I'm ready," Derek said, standing up and smoothing his jacket. He caught his reflection in the polished steel of the toilet unit. His face was gaunt, his once golden hair now streaked with premature gray and thinning at the temples. He looked 10 years older than the man who had walked the red carpet at the Met Gala, but his eyes still held a flicker of that old, arrogant spark. "Remember the strategy, Derek." Finch sighed, unlocking the door. "Humility. You are a broken man seeking redemption. You were manipulated by a sociopathic mistress. You just want to know your children. Do not, I repeat, do not mention the sterling legacy, the company, or your rights. You have no rights here. You are begging for a privilege." "I know the play, Harold." Derek snapped, his old tone surfacing for a second before he tamped it down. "I just want to see them. They're my twins, my flesh and blood. Isila can take my company. She can take my reputation, but she can't rewrite biology." Derek truly believed this. In the long, lonely nights in his cell, he had convinced himself of a narrative where he was the victim. Sasha Vane had been a witch who cast a spell on him. Isila was the scorned woman who was punishing him too harshly. But surely when she saw him, really saw him, broken and penitent, she would remember the 10 years they spent together. She would remember that he was the father of her children. He walked into the courtroom with his head bowed, playing the role perfectly. The courtroom was intimidatingly silent. It was a high-ceilinged chamber with dark mahogany paneling that seemed to absorb the light. On the left side, the gallery was empty, save for a few reporters who had sniffed out the hearing. On the right side sat the opposition. Isila didn't look back when he entered. She sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture rigid and perfect. She wore a dress of deep navy blue, conservative, yet undeniably expensive, the fabric draping like water. Her hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that highlighted the sharp, aristocratic lines of her neck. Next to her sat Julian Blackwood. Seeing Julian in the flesh made Derek's stomach churn with acidic jealousy. Julian looked effortless. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a black cashmere turtleneck and a charcoal blazer looking like a modern-day prince. He had one arm resting on the back of Isila's chair, a subtle protective gesture that screamed ownership. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. "The Honorable Justice Evelyn O'Malley presiding." Justice O'Malley swept in. She was a woman in her 60s with eyes like flint and a reputation for shredding deadbeat dads. She took her seat and glared over her spectacles at the assembly. "Be seated. We are here for the matter of Sterling versus Bennett Blackwood regarding the petition for visitation rights of minors Leo and Mia." Derek flinched. Bennett Blackwood. Since when was that her name, Mr. Finch? The judge said, turning to Derek's lawyer. "Your client is currently awaiting sentencing for massive corporate fraud. He has no assets, no home, and is facing incarceration. Why exactly should this court grant him access to 2 toddlers he has never met?" Finch stood up, shuffling his papers. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges his past mistakes. However, he contends that the bond between a father and his children is sacred. Mr. Sterling is willing to undergo supervised visits, parenting classes, whatever the court deems necessary. He simply wishes to make amends and be a part of their lives, however small. He was under severe emotional duress and manipulation by a third party at the time of the children's birth." Derek put his face in his hands, right on cue, trying to summon a tear. "Manipulation." The voice cut through the room like a scalpel. It wasn't the judge. It was Isaila's lawyer. She was a tall, imposing woman named Eleanor Cross, known in New York legal circles as the Terminator. Eleanor Cross stood up, bypassing the podium to walk toward the center of the room. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling claims he was manipulated. We argue that his actions were a calculated, cold-blooded business decision, one he made with full faculties. Objection, Finch said weakly. Speculation. I have the receipt, Eleanor Cross said, holding up a piece of paper. Or rather, the hospital intake forms. Judge O'Malley waved her hand. Overruled. Proceed, Ms. Cross. Eleanor walked to the witness stand. I call Isila Bennett to the stand. Isila rose. She walked past Derek without even a flicker of recognition in her amber eyes. She took the oath, her voice steady and low. Mrs. Bennett, Eleanor began. Could you describe the events of November 14th, 2 years ago? Isila took a breath. The room went deathly still. I was in the ICU at Mount Sinai, Isila said, looking directly at the judge. I was in the middle of a hypertensive crisis caused by severe preeclampsia. My organs were shutting down. The doctors told us that I needed an emergency C-section to save the twins, but that the surgery carried a high risk of maternal mortality due to my heart condition. And where was your husband, Mr. Sterling, while this was being explained? He was checking his watch, Isila said. Her voice didn't waver, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He told me that probate court would be a hassle. He asked me to sign divorce papers so he could marry his mistress Sasha Vane before I died. He wanted a clean break to avoid inheritance taxes. Derek shifted in his seat. That's not... I was scared, he whispered to his lawyer. And when you went into cardiac arrest? Eleanor asked. He left, Isila said. The alarms went off. The nurses screamed for help. Derek stepped over the crash cart cables to get to the door. His exact words were, I'm not a Dr. Isila. Good luck. A collective gasp went through the few reporters in the back. Judge O'Malley's expression darkened into something terrifying. Did he ever attempt to contact you to check if you survived, to ask about the babies? No, Isila said. For 2 years he believed I was dead. He never held a funeral. He never visited the gravesite he assumed I was in. He simply erased me. Mr. Sterling claims he wants to be a father, Eleanor Cross said, turning to face Derek with a look of pure disgust. But we have evidence that suggests otherwise. Eleanor walked to the bailiff and handed over a document. It was yellowed with age, a carbon copy from the hospital archives. Your Honor, Eleanor said, this is a refusal of financial responsibility and medical proxy form. It is dated the night of the incident. It is signed by Derek Sterling. Derek squinted. He remembered signing a stack of papers the nurse had shoved at him while he was trying to rush Sasha out of the room. He thought they were just release forms or insurance cancellations. Please read the highlighted paragraph, Eleanor requested. Judge O'Malley adjusted her glasses, reading aloud. Her voice was flat, echoing in the silent room. The undersigned Derek Sterling hereby terminates his medical proxy over the patient Isila Bennett. Furthermore, regarding the fetuses in utero, the undersigned acknowledges the high probability of fetal demise and hereby waives all parental rights claims and financial liabilities associated with their potential birth or burial. The undersigned declares the pregnancy terminated for insurance purposes. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Derek felt the blood drain from his face. He hadn't read it. He had just wanted to stop the billing cycle. He had signed away his children to save a few $1,000s on a hospital bill he could have easily afforded back then. I didn't know what I was signing, Derek stammered, standing up. It was a mistake, a clerical error. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Judge O'Malley barked, banging her gavel. You declared your children terminated for insurance purposes. You categorized them as a liability to be written off. I was under stress, Derek pleaded, his voice cracking. Sasha made me do it. Sasha Vane didn't hold the pen, Derek, Isola said from the stand. It was the first time she had addressed him directly. You did. You evaluated us like a failing asset and you liquidated us. But I'm here now, Derek shouted, tears finally streaming down his face. Real tears this time, tears of panic. I lost everything, Isola. They are all I have left. Please, I just want to see them. I want to tell them I'm sorry. I want them to know who their father is. Isola looked at him. Her expression wasn't angry. It was filled with a profound, distant pity. They know who their father is, Derek, she said softly. She nodded to the bailiff at the back of the room. Please let them in. The heavy oak doors creaked open. The tension in the room broke as two small figures trotted in. They were adorable 3 years old, dressed in matching little pea coats. Leo had messy dark curls and Isola's nose. Mia had bright eyes and a mischievous smile. They held the hands of a nanny looking around the strange wood-paneled room with wide eyes. Derek's heart hammered against his ribs. He stepped out from behind the defense table, ignoring his lawyer's hiss to sit down. Leo, Mia, he breathed, his voice trembling with a mixture of grief and awe. They were beautiful. They were his second chance. They were the Sterling heirs. He took a step toward them, his hands outstretched. Hey there. It's me. The twins stopped. They looked at the strange, gray-faced man in the cheap suit who was crying and reaching for them. They recoiled, shrinking back against the nanny's legs. They didn't know him. To them, he was a scary stranger. Then Mia's eyes darted past Derek. Her face lit up like a sunrise. Papa, she squealed. She broke away from the nanny. She didn't run to Derek. She ran right past him, dodging his outstretched hand as if he were a piece of furniture. She ran straight to the plaintiff's table. Julian Blackwood had already dropped to one knee. He caught Mia as she launched herself into his arms, burying her face in his neck. Gotcha, Julian whispered, his voice warm and rumbling completely, at odds with the icy tycoon the world knew. Leo followed a second later, scrambling up onto Julian's other knee. Julian gathered them both in, kissing the tops of their heads, with an ease and familiarity that could not be faked. It was the intimacy of 1,000 bedtimes, 1,000 scraped knees, 1,000 mornings of making pancakes. Derek stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, his hand still reaching out to empty air. The image before him was a knife twisting in his gut. Julian, his rival, the man he had spent years trying to destroy in business, was holding his children. And the children were looking at Julian with absolute adoration. Papa, look, Leo said, holding up a small toy car he had smuggled in. Vroom, I see it, buddy, Julian smiled. Quiet voice now, remember, we're in the big room. Derek felt like he couldn't breathe. No, he whispered. That's not right. They're mine. Isola stepped down from the witness stand and walked over to them. She placed a hand on Julian's shoulder, and he covered it with his own. The three of them, Isola, Julian, and the twins, formed a closed circle, a complete unit. Derek was on the outside looking in through a window he had bricked up himself. Eleanor Cross cleared her throat, breaking the tableau. Your Honor, Eleanor said, we would like to submit one final piece of evidence to close this matter permanently. She placed a blue folder on the judge's bench. 2 years ago, after Mr. Sterling was declared legally absent and having waived his rights via the hospital proxy, Julian Blackwood petitioned the Swiss courts for adoption. Given the abandonment and the lack of a contesting parent, the adoption was fast-tracked and finalized. She turned to look at Derek, her eyes cold. They are not Sterling heirs, Mr. Sterling. Their legal names are Leo Julian Blackwood and Mia Isila Blackwood. You are in the eyes of the law, a stranger to them. The judge nodded slowly, closing the file. The adoption decree is valid and recognized by the state of New York. And regarding the mother, Eleanor added, Mr. Sterling is petitioning for access based on his former marriage. However, Isila turned to face Derek. She lifted her left hand. For the first time, Derek noticed the ring. It wasn't the gaudy 10-carat diamond he had bought her years ago to show off to his friends. It was a band of rare brushed platinum inset with 3 deep red rubies, symbolizing the 3 lives Julian had saved that night. We were married this morning, Derek, Isila said quietly. In a private ceremony at City Hall. Just us and the kids. Derek staggered back, gripping the edge of the defendant's table to keep from collapsing. Married, but you were mine. You were always mine. I was never yours, Isila corrected him, her voice devoid of hate, which somehow made it worse. I was just an accessory you wore until it went out of style. Julian didn't save me because he wanted to own me. He saved me because he loved me. He loved me when I was dying. He loved me when I was broken. He loved the children you threw away. She looked down at Julian, who was tickling Mia to keep her from squirming. The look of pure love that passed between Isila and Julian was something Derek had never experienced, not once in his entire selfish life. You have no place here, Derek, Isila said. You chose Sasha. You chose the easy way out. You chose death. We chose life. Justice O'Malley banged the gavel one final time. It sounded like a coffin lid slamming shut. Petition denied. The court finds that Mr. Sterling has no legal standing, no biological claim due to the signed waiver, and no moral ground to request visitation. A permanent restraining order is hereby issued. Mr. Sterling, if you come within 500 feet of the Blackwood family, you will be arrested immediately. Mr. Finch, the judge added, looking at Derek's lawyer. Get your client out of my courtroom. He has a transport van waiting to take him to Rikers Island. Finch grabbed Derek's arm. Come on, Derek, it's over. Don't make a scene. It'll only hurt your parole hearing. Derek resisted for a moment. He looked at the twins one last time. Leo was showing Julian the toy car again. Mia was playing with Isila's necklace. They didn't even look up as he was dragged away. Leo, Mia. Derek croaked, his voice breaking. Mia looked up at the sound of the strange man yelling. She looked confused, then turned to Julian. Papa, who is that sad man? Julian looked at Derek. His dark eyes were hard, unforgiving. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He just looked at Derek with the finality of a grim reaper. He's nobody, sweetheart, Julian said, loud enough for Derek to hear. Just a ghost from a long time ago. Go back to playing. He's nobody. The words echoed in Derek's skull as the bailiffs hauled him through the double doors. The heavy wood slammed shut, cutting off the view of the family he had created and destroyed. He was pulled down the hallway, his polyester suit bunching up his wrists, handcuffed behind his back. He had wanted to be a king. He had wanted an heir. He had wanted a legacy. Now, as he was shoved into the elevator that would take him down to the prisoner transport, Derek Sterling realized the full extent of his punishment. It wasn't the prison cell that awaited him. It wasn't the bankruptcy. It was the knowledge that his children would grow up calling his enemy Father, and they would never ever know that Derek Sterling had existed at all. He hadn't just lost them. He had been erased. The elevator doors closed, sealing him in darkness. And that is the tragic, yet satisfying end of Derek Sterling. He learned too late that when you treat people like disposable objects, you eventually get thrown away yourself. Isila proved that the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's thriving with someone who actually knows your worth. What did you think of Derek's punishment? Did he deserve forgiveness, or was Isila right to cut him off completely? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.